Hello, and welcome to today's webcast entitled Understanding and Unlocking the Potential of Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Intrapreneurship. My name is Jeff, and I will be your web event specialist today. During the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. You can ask questions at any time during today's presentation. Please click on the green Q&A icon in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, type your question into the open area, and click the send button to submit. If you would like to view the presentation in full screen mode, click on the full screen button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. You can press the escape key on your keyboard to return to your original view. Finally, for optimal viewing and participation, please disable all pop-up blockers. Should you need technical assistance, as a best practice, we suggest you first refresh your browser by pressing F5 on your keyboard. If that does not resolve the issue, please click the menu option in the upper right-hand corner of your screen and select the support feature for online troubleshooting. It is now my pleasure to turn today's webcast over to Dr. Peter Hurst, Executive Director, MIT Sloan Executive Education. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Good afternoon, everybody from MIT, and welcome to the next in our Innovation at Work webinar series. In this webinar series, we provide opportunity to meet the faculty who teach in our MIT Sloan Executive Education programs. And today, I'm very delighted to welcome to the table Bill Aulet, who will be our speaker today. We actually have over 1,600 people who registered for this webinar today, and so as Jeff mentioned, there's an opportunity on the webinar to ask questions. I'd encourage you to do so as you go through, and we'll try our best to get to those questions. Also, another innovation for us today, after this segment of the webinar finishes, we will continue with a Facebook chat from 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time. I realize some of you are all over the world, so that's after the first hour. So turning to Bill Aulet. Bill is the Managing Director of the Martin Trust Center for Entrepreneurship at MIT. Bill is himself a successful entrepreneur and has turned into something of an academic, but he is still, I can tell you, very hands-on. We all behave very entrepreneurially around here when we're working with Bill, and he, in fact, is in the process of finishing a book called Disciplined Entrepreneurship, 24 Steps to Help Make Entrepreneurs More Successful. I'm told that's the working title, but I hope it actually ends up being the final title. It's a good one. Before I hand over to Bill, we just thought we'd want to make sure that you are all interacting with our polling system and actually ask a useful question to get Bill set up. And that is, we're just curious how many of you who are now listening to us might have heard or heard Bill speak, or perhaps even read extensively any of his writings on Twitter and other places, just to give us a sense of how familiar that people might be out there with Bill. So we're just pushing that poll now, and as those results are coming in, I will hand over to Bill, and hopefully the poll results will come out any second now. Give me a few more seconds for people just to vote. I think that's great. Jeff, if you could perhaps show us the results of that poll, and as they come up, it's my pleasure to hand over to Bill Aulet, who is going to help us understand innovation, entrepreneurship, and intrapreneurship, particularly their potential and how to realize it.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and thank you all for tuning in today, and hopefully it will be a productive session for you all. That's my goal here today. And I know some of you, I just saw that the results I've spoken to before, and so there will be some things that you've heard before, but I also assure you there's going to be new things as well. I wanted to just ask two other questions before we jumped into this. The first question was very helpful to understand, what percent of you, what numbers of you have heard me speak before. The two questions I want to ask are, what are you most interested in, a priori, before we start this? Do you think it's innovation? Do you think it's entrepreneurship? Or do you think it's intrapreneurship? Which are you most interested in, just so I can gauge it and spend the time on the right item? Interesting. Okay. This is a great tool, Peter. So this is it's dominated by innovation first, entrepreneurship second, and then intrapreneurship third. Okay. So thank you, Jeff. I think we can go to the next one. The next thing that I just wanted to know so I can target my message is where are people from here? What parts of the world are you from? The beautiful thing about this is we can cover the entire globe by just walking across the street. So if you could just enter what part of the world are you from, that would be very helpful as I start to think about my message here. So North America is in the lead here. Europe's coming in strong. Latin America, passing Europe. Asia Pacific. Okay. Excellent. So that's terrifically quantifiable data. So it looks like most 60% from North America, about 15 from Latin America, which is the second most. Europe is about 13. Asia Pacific is still asleep at 6%. All right, excellent. Well, we can close that, Jeff, and then we'll let me jump in. And this is things that you know, about 10% of you have heard before, so I apologize, but it's important to lay the foundation, and I do this in my classes here at MIT, because when we're going to talk about innovation and entrepreneurship, it's very important that we define these things very clearly up front. First, let's start with entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the ability to create a company where there was no company before. It's done by entrepreneurs, usually teams of entrepreneurs. The idea that it's a singular entrepreneur is not what the research bears out. But the interesting thing is when we talk to governments and organizations and they talk about entrepreneurship, we found an additional additional layer that helps add benefit to people when they're thinking about entrepreneurship. And that is the two different types of entrepreneurship. First, on the left-hand side, we have what's called SME. And a lot of governments organize around SME, small, medium enterprises. And these are companies that are small companies or maybe medium-sized companies, but they're serving a local market. And it could be restaurant, dry cleaners, service company, usually family businesses. And these are good businesses. They're geographically distributed to where the population is. But they're fundamentally different than what I'm going to spend my time talking about here, which is innovation-driven enterprises, or IDE entrepreneurship. These on the right that I'm going to talk about are ones that are looking to create exports. They're looking to sell to global markets, or at least super-regional markets. And they have a sustainable competitive advantage that allows them to do that. They're not just trading companies. They're not just a franchise of something else, something else that's headquartered elsewhere. These are truly new-to-the-world type of products that are new-to-the-world type of offerings that will create high-growth opportunities. Now, the risk on the right-hand side is much higher for innovation-driven enterprise, IDE entrepreneurship, but the benefits when you get it are much, much higher. And on the left, you have the risk being lower and people can control the company, but they tend to be small, medium enterprises and stay small, medium enterprises. You can shift from the left to the right. But what we focus here on at MIT, and you know, focus is critical for entrepreneurs, is the entrepreneurship on the right, because it requires a different skill set, a different cadence. As you can see, the delta T, or the time to get things going on the left for SMEs is short, relatively short. Whereas on the right, it takes a long time to get an IDE, entrepreneurial venture, off the ground. But when you do, after the risk, there's exponential growth, whereas on the left, SME is more linear growth. On the left, you need less investment, and on the right, you need more investment. So it's a matter of risk-reward, and we're really focused on the right-hand side. So that's really what we're looking to drive, and these are the ones that really create the predominance of jobs, the predominance of wealth throughout the world. And this is what we're very interested in. It's not that the ones, again, on the left are not as good, but it's just the ones on the right tend to grow and dominate things over time. So that being said, we're going to focus on innovation as opposed to just building an enterprise that serves a local market, which raises the question, what is innovation? And innovation is a word that the Wall Street Journal recently said is one of the most overused words in the English language right now. And so we would like a precise definition of that. And so what we always talk about is innovation has to create value. It has to do something positive for the world. It has to increase profits. It has to improve social conditions. It has to do something real. And so in that, the literature shows, when you look at Ed Roberts or other people, is that innovation equals invention plus commercialization. However, in this case, we've changed it to a product, which I'll talk about in a second, invention times commercialization, to be mathematically correct. So innovation does not equal just invention, because invention is a technology, an idea, a patent. That doesn't necessarily create value. There's lots of that stuff out there that's not doing good for humanity. It's just a great idea. And as we say in our course here, ideas are cheap. It's implementation that's expensive and really, really hard. So invention is a good thing to have. Technology is a good thing to have. But it needs to be commercialized to create value. And the commercialization aspect of this equation has to be more than zero to get innovation. Likewise, you have to have some invention, or you have to acquire some invention to create innovation. So that's why it's the product, not just the sum of those two. And if you think about this, innovation, the most innovative company in the world today is Apple. Yet when you look at their innovations, from the Macintosh to the iPod to the iPhone to the iPad, they weren't the ones who invented the idea. In the case of the Macintosh, it was Xerox PARC, but they were the ones who commercialized it. So a lot of times the innovation, the invention, doesn't even have to come from within your own company. Again, Google is a great example. Google today is an advertising company, and that's what's created this multi-billion-dollar juggernaut. But the invention that made them an advertising company actually came from Bill Gross at Overture, and they were the ones who commercialized it. So commercialization is extremely important in what entrepreneurs do, and that's why we call it innovation-driven entrepreneurship. There needs to be some innovation underneath it. So there's invention. Innovation is not the same thing as invention. It's something that requires commercialization. So when we look at innovation, step back here for a second and deal with the first topic of innovation, and we'll return to entrepreneurship. When you look at how the innovation at new ways of doing advertising has made Google, Apple we've talked about, Angry Birds created a company in Finland where there was nothing before, and now is creating hundreds of jobs. MIT, our students create 900 plus new companies every year. Our alumni, I should say, create 900 new companies every year. It is an enormous number of new ideas that are possible out there. There's no shortage of good ideas. The question is where are the entrepreneurs to commercialize those inventions? And when you look at the Fortune 500, you see a great turnover in the number of companies, which I'll go to next. But the opportunity, when you look back at history, DuPont, when they first came up with nylon stockings, there were literally riots to get to their new product. Eli Lilly totally changed the whole industry with a new way of drug design, rational drug design. Nokia went from a company that does rubber boots to selling phones now. Corning recreated itself to be a fiber optics company. If you innovate, it can create enormous opportunities for you, as we see today. Apple, Facebook, Google, all these companies were based on innovations that many people could have done. At the flip side, the exposure of not innovating is also extraordinarily high, and I speak to a lot of companies about this, about the exposure of them not innovating. And when you look at these companies here, at one point, all these companies were almost unassailable at their position at the top. You know, IBM is on here. I worked at IBM, and when I worked at IBM, started there in 1981, you were trained to not violate the consent decree of the U.S. government because they had such a powerful position that the antitrust lawsuits were brought against them. Yet today, IBM could have been out of business because they were not innovative enough. And you see other people like BlackBerry, which we're experiencing today, Kodak out of business, Lehman Brothers. Some of these like Nestle have revived on other parts of their business, but core parts of their business like instant coffee just completely gone. And even governments that don't innovate. When you look at the U.S. Postal Service today, which once when I grew up was a job for life, there is no job for life anymore. It's can you innovate? Can you have the skills to do that? And your company has to continue to innovate, otherwise it could be eaten. So, when we've talked about innovation, people talk mostly about one type of innovation, and I want to break innovation down some more to look at the different types of innovation and the categories. People mostly talk about disruptive innovation, but I want to look and say disruptive is just one type of innovation. There's also incremental innovation, which in a large company is the best kind of innovation in a lot of ways. You want to make your product 10% better, 20% better, 30% better. All the innovations do not and should not be disruptive. Once we have a disruption, we need to incrementally improve that. So you can have incremental or sustaining innovations, you can have disruptive, and you can also have innovations that have already been proven in other industries that they laterally move into your industry. And these are often overlooked. Now, within those categories, I would say that you have 5 types of innovation. You have technical innovation. But again, the one that's most often dominates the literature and discussion is disruptive technology innovation. I understand, we're at MIT. We love technology here, but I have to say technology can be overrated sometimes when you look at other types of innovations, like process innovations and how valuable they are. A huge one right now is business model innovation, how effective Salesforce is. And the fundamental innovation behind Google is a business model innovation. The fundamental innovation behind iTunes is a business model innovation. And then you have other innovations that can be marketing, strategy, position, and then there's other ones out there as well, which I leave open. So, and this really is kind of a matrix where you could have incremental process or disruptive process, or you could have, disruptive business model, incremental business model, lateral business model. See when Salesforce.com picked up the utility business model and brought it into the high-tech industry. So I think it's whenever I talk to people and they want to talk about innovation, I think it's very important to kind of go through this cycle of here's entrepreneurship, and then there's innovation-driven enterprise entrepreneurship, ID entrepreneurship, then how innovation is different than invention, and then the different types of innovation, because it makes it much more understandable and much less threatening to corporate executives once they understand this, because they are very supportive of incremental innovation where they're threatened by disruptive, and we're going to address later how they should deal with that. So one of the questions that when I first started 5 years ago, I got a tremendous amount of inquiries about was, can entrepreneurship really be taught? Come on, Bill. I mean, can it be taught? You're born an entrepreneur or you're not born an entrepreneur. I mean, did anybody teach Richard Branson how to be an entrepreneur? Did anybody teach Bill Gates how to be an entrepreneur? Did anybody teach Larry Ellison how to be an entrepreneur? It just happened, you know. I think that has been absolutely shown to be not true, in the sense that some people might be born to be this, and some people just will not be, but most people are in the middle. And the experience that we've shown at MIT is that through a combination of things, entrepreneurship can be taught. It's not just taught in the classroom. We teach the skills in the classroom, but it's also the spirit of entrepreneurship, to believe that, yes, you can be an entrepreneur, and you're in an environment with other people that are entrepreneurs, that creates this. When you look at MIT itself, MIT does not necessarily get the smartest people in the world. Caltech, Harvard, there's a lot of other places that get very, very smart people. But MIT starts companies at a prolific rate relative to these other. So it's not because they're the smartest people in the world. Something is happening once they get here. And what it is, some people think, is, well, it's the technology that they get access to here. But in fact, the technology that they get access to goes through the Technology Licensing Office and represents less than 5% of the total companies that are started with technology that comes directly out of the laboratories. So it's actually them learning about how to start a company, that commercialization side of it, and then being able to identify good inventions, technology, patents, and the like. And that's what our students do. And they have been very, very successful at this. As the Ed Roberts study shows, today there's well over 26,000 companies started. The data on this slide is from 2009. There's millions of jobs created. There's probably now over $2 trillion in annual revenue, which if the companies just started by MIT were a standalone economy, it would be the 11th biggest economy in the world. So, and there's no end in sight. The companies that are starting now, the pace is just increasing. And you can see that when you go through our center and you come and visit, and all the 100-plus people who came to Entrepreneurship Development Program. If you're on here, thank you. I love hearing about how successful your businesses are going and new ideas you have. So entrepreneurship can be taught. It's a combination, as this kind of slide here shows you, of supporting infrastructure, but most of all, it's, do you have the culture to believe in it? Then do you get the training, and then do you get plugged into the network of other people, like-minded people, so that you can kind of get in that positive feedback loop and drive it forward. And that's what happens at MIT, and that's why we love it when people come here and they go back, and maybe some of you will talk about that later in the Q&A, and how it transforms you. So we're very, very fortunate to have this robust ecosystem here, and that's what we like to expose you to here. And I'm going to talk more about how that is becoming more and more global throughout the world. In places, I just came back from London. I'm going to Bucharest, Romania. Berlin apparently is just popping at the seams right now. The spirit is spreading far and wide. The entrepreneurial virus, thank God, is spreading. So I want to go back and tie this into intrapreneurship as well. And this is a good study in what innovation is about and what it's not, and the different types of innovation. So there's a case study about 3M, and I don't know if we posted the article, but if not, we should post the article. It was a Business Week article cover story from, I think, June 2007. And it talks about 3M. And this was a fascinating situation, because 3M had their financial results were going up, but they were going up kind of in an oscillating way. It wasn't just one smooth line, but they were trending up. And the and if you looked at it and you kind of drew the line, where this was. It was going up and it looked great. But if you didn't like oscillations, if you don't like roller coasters, it wasn't so great. If you wanted a nice smooth ride, it wasn't so great. And financial people generally like nice smooth things. They like to take the variations out of the system. So what happened to 3M was that the financial people got a hold of it and they said, we can't have this anymore. We want predictable results. And so what they did is they went out to the feet of the great leader of predictable results, Jack Welch and the Six Sigma protocol at General Electric. And they brought in Six Sigma Black Belt. And this new CEO took all the variations out of the system, and 3M appeared to be a great story. The line smoothed out, it was going up. You know, it wasn't, the curve wasn't as steep, the slope of the line going up wasn't as steep as it was before, once they got it out of ways, but it was now smoother. And everybody seemed happy, but the problem is that when the CEO got promoted and went to Boeing, that when they looked back in the cupboard, and here you see the cupboard of innovation was bare. There was no more innovation in there because by applying Six Sigma, they had moved strictly to incremental innovation, and they hadn't gone to disruptive. And it looked good in the short run, and it looked bad in the long term. And so all of a sudden, 3M was in an innovation crisis, and they had to restart the engine. And the moral of the story was, and that we had the person in the next one, George Buckley here, who took over, Sir George Buckley, and talk about how he dealt with this. But the moral of the story is Six Sigma applies to manufacturing. It does not apply to innovation. Innovation can be an unpredictable, ugly process. Messy process, not ugly, messy process at times. And you have to understand that. It's a experimentation where there's failure involved in it. But if you want to get the next big hit, you got to try things that have never been done before. And when you try things that have never been done before, they don't work right the first time. You learn things, and then ultimately you spiral towards the new solution, the new breakthrough innovation, and that's how innovation works. So you can't just have all disruptive innovation, nor can you just have all incremental innovations. You have to have a balance of these in your organization. So as we look at this, the big challenge 6 years ago was, as Susan Hockfield said, the president of MIT, the challenge, the moral imperative of our generation is the energy challenge. How are we going to address this need for energy to improve the standard of living of people simultaneously while dealing with the environmental effects of it and dealing with the national security effects? So MIT set out to apply its legacy heritage of entrepreneurship and innovation, or innovation-driven entrepreneurship, to the energy area. And I studied it extensively, and my report came back was, we have a great legacy, we all know that, and it's not directly applicable to the energy area. While we have a lot of great assets, we need to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new model for energy, because energy is so much different than IT. It's so much different than biotechnology. Energy has no underlying law that's driving it. In the IT industry, you have Moore's law. The power of the chip basically doubles every 18 months. Metcalfe's law, the power of the network, the more people get on it, goes up exponentially with the number of useful nodes. In biotech, you had genomics, decoding the human genome. There was no such fundamental law in energy. And the energy innovations, when you see them take place, the horizontal drilling and the like, take a matter of decades to do. Not 2 years, not 5 years. We're talking 40 years. And we're talking in terms of tens of years, not 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So the whole infrastructure of innovation, from venture capital to the mentality, go-go mentality of entrepreneurs, to the dealing with large companies and disintermediating them, to just dealing with the government. We don't need to deal with the government. Had to be totally redone for energy, because to succeed in energy, you need to have many disciplines, not just be a good software coder, but you need to understand biology, chemistry, thermodynamics, electrical engineering. It's a slew of things. And you have to understand financing, not just venture capital. In fact, the venture capital model didn't fit well, but how do we get financing for projects? How do we get financing from big government? How do we get financing from corporate? And how do you leverage all that? So the CFO job was, an order of magnitude more complicated in energy companies than it was in IT companies or the other companies we were dealing with, even the medical. The government is not something that you cannot allow a seat at the table, because energy is a service that applies to all people in society. And they feel it's a right, and if they don't get it, in fact, they can die. So you need to incorporate government and the will of the people and the policy considerations when you build an energy company. And then with the corporates, you can't disintermediate them, because they control this thing called the grid, or they control the pipelines, which you can't recreate. These are multi-billion-dollar, potentially even trillion-dollar infrastructure that just can't be recreated. So the whole mentality, the whole skill set that you needed in energy needed to be re-looked at it. And so that's what we did, and that's what we have a course on. And we can talk more about that later. We run a course, which I think is why I'm doing this webinar today, that really drills down into this and shows you companies that are succeeding and shows you how to pick out ones that will win from ones that won't win. It was, I think, 3 years ago in the class, we looked at it and we said there's no way that Better Place is going to succeed, because when you analyze them through the lens of this model, they will not succeed. And sure enough, Better Place has not succeeded. And that was really, I think, crystal clear if you understand this model 3 years ago or more. Moving on, because I want to make sure there's time for questions. So in the energy field, which I get a lot of questions, I've just talked to 3 big companies in the past 24 hours. What do we do? Well, the first thing is you have to understand the system. I'm a huge believer in understanding the system. People are great. As I say, people are some of my best friends, but you have to understand and trust the system, because people can't really overcome it. And then once you understand the system, take a long-term, disciplined, holistic approach to it. This is not like writing an app for iOS. You have to think long-term. The product that you're going to deliver is most likely a commodity, not a high-margin software product, but it is something where if you make 20% gross margin, that's fabulous, because an electron is an electron is an electron at the end of the day. And so it's very important you get educated to the current trends. You have a team that's policy savvy and financially deep as well. And you design your organization so that you can simultaneously deliver reliability, which is fundamental to the energy sector, and at the same time continue to innovate. And those two pull at each other, and which raises a question as to how do you do that organizationally, and there are ways to do that. And then measure yourself, make sure you have a portfolio, and then continue to experiment and react to what the market's telling you. So now just a few, I want to talk about 3 major trends that I see going on right now. It used to be that we would talk with Stanford and ourselves, we'd talk a lot about what's going on in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, innovation, IDE entrepreneurship has become, shall we say, democratized. The world is flat now. There's some very, very interesting things going around the world. As I said, I just came back from London, and I see a very strong similarity there to what's going on with New York City, which is also blowing up. It is not the heavy type of technology where it's the hardware, the energy, the medical technology necessarily, but it's more the creative side, which is going to be one of my next points here. But London and Berlin, very, very dynamic scenes. We have a strong group here from Amsterdam that's been working on things and going back there. A growing footprint. Finland, Aalto, hats off to Aalto University and the things that they're doing with their student entrepreneurship organization. Have been working in REAP as Scotland and New Zealand. These are ones that there's a partnership between the government, the academic institutions, the entrepreneurs, the risk capital, and the big companies that all understand it's in their interest to drive entrepreneurship. And you're going to see more and more of this. And as well as Romania, which has had little support in the past and really has come out of nowhere, is now a dynamic scene. I'm actually going there in the next 2 weeks. And then Istanbul is another scene. So entrepreneurship now is much less localized than it used to be. We learn a tremendous amount when we go out there, and it's really something that's now, rather than being top-down information coming out, it's more like a network where you have to stay in touch with all the things that are going on. And governments are full bore in this. I mean, the number of calls we get from Washington and to participate in things that they're doing, it's so important to, I tell you, the Obama administration for jobs, because it's IDE entrepreneurs that are creating the jobs. Over 2/3 of the jobs created are created by IDE entrepreneurs. This has led to discussion about immigration that's ongoing right now, which we could talk about in the Q&A. Very impressive things, experiments being run with Startup Chile with results. Canada is really becoming much more active with starting with their immigration plan and things going on in Quebec and Toronto. Singapore, real commitment to this, some questions about the culture. There's a battle for talent going on out there, and it's global. Let me just see how we're doing on time. Okay, so let me just say two other things, and we'll open up the Q&A. In the past, and we've seen this over the past about 5 years coming up, and it's very clear now, there used to be two parts to a startup that really mattered. There was a technology and the business side. It's what they call the hackers and the hustlers. You wanted someone on your team who was a hacker. That meant they were a technical person. And then you wanted someone who was a business person. They were the hustler. They were getting orders. They were doing all the business side of it. And those two provided, the yin and the yang to make a great company. And it was a successful formula. Today, you've seen the rise of New York City. You've seen the rise of San Francisco. You've seen the rise of London. And you've seen the rise of Berlin. And this is in large part due to design is becoming more and more important, in that the technology is becoming more commoditized, and not that there's still opportunities to differentiate yourself on the technology side, but in certain industries, technology is becoming more commoditized, and the business is becoming more prolific as entrepreneurship training is getting better and better. The design, the user experience, is becoming the determining factor. And it used to be if I had an A+ technology and a B design and user experience, I'd win. But now the product with B technology but A+ design wins every day of the week. It's almost no question in consumer products. And this is the story of Apple, and this is the story of the rise of New York City to be a center of entrepreneurship. So today, it's no longer just hacker and hustler. It's no longer just the technologist and a business person, but now there's a design person there. So it's a hacker, a hustler, and a hipster, as we call it. So you need all three of them to have a great company, especially when it comes to consumer. The last thing I want to mention, and Peter mentioned this in the upfront, is there's this knee-jerk reaction now. Well, we don't need business plans. venture capitalists don't read business plans. We don't need business plans. Let's get rid of the business plans. That's a waste of time. You know, hold on a second. If you're just doing an app that doesn't need it, lean startup makes sense. You can iterate. But when you start to make investments in hardware and medical or energy or things, you know, you're crazy not to come up with a business plan. You need this business plan. It's not that it's thinking through the scenarios, and there are new types of business plans. It's not how great, you know, what your English looks like, but it's more the logic, the full systems logic that you go through. And we're very big believers in that. As Peter mentioned up front, we have a 24-step approach to disciplined entrepreneurship to start ventures, and that will be coming out soon. Certainly by August, it will be generally available from Wiley, and that's what we use in our classes. So it's relevant for both light technology, you know, for kind of these apps and software, but it's also relevant for heavy technology. So I think that's it. This is just the first public showing of the game board map. For those of you who took EDP, you'll see this is new, and it steps you through the kind of messy process, but we're bringing a systematic approach to it as to what the 24 steps are, and then looks a little bit like chutes and ladders, where if you go in and your total addressable market isn't big enough, well, then you have to go back and redefine your beachhead market, or it's too big, you have to go back and redefine your beachhead market. So it's an iterative process that we made system look serial to make it better, to improve your odds. But entrepreneurship is an art and a science, and we're trying to make it more scientific so that entrepreneurs can be more successful, because the world sure needs it. So with that, Peter, should I discuss these classes, or should we go Q&A?
Well, thank you very much, Bill. Let's take a pause and look at some of the questions that have been coming in. I think while we've been talking, we've been receiving a lot of questions. Thank you very much. Do keep them coming. So first of all, I think I'm going to try to combine several themes of questions that were coming in while you were speaking and formulate them into a single well-asked question. If I do that well, you will all get answers to the questions you've been asking on these topics. So, Bill, you mentioned REAP when you were speaking. I'm not sure that people necessarily know what that is. That's the Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program.
Yes.
We've been getting quite a few questions from people asking. There was some surprise about you talking about the role of government.
Yeah.
And what is the role of government? How is it the government is promoting entrepreneurship and innovation? And we've also been getting quite a lot of questions about sort of the international dimensions of this. You've mentioned that during the presentation several cities and regions that perhaps you've been visiting recently. But one particular category of these, which I was interested to see people were asking about, is what about low-income countries and developing regions and nations? You know, what if anything, is the role for entrepreneurship and innovation-based entrepreneurship? Can they participate in this, or are they being left behind?
So let me parse that to two things: the role of government, and then the international dimensions and kind of entrepreneurship in the developing world. Is that fair?
Great.
Okay. So first of all, I'm going to go back to the chart here, if I may. That shows the different elements of it, because I kind of jumped over this. In government, the thing about government is they can play a positive role and they can play a negative role, and it's not a linear function. First of all, the government has to provide stability, and they can provide some early stage funding. But if they try to run businesses or they get too involved, they actually create a negative impact on it. So understanding the role, and when I look at an example that I think is doing a very good job of this right now is New Zealand. New Zealand has public sector people go into the government for a time period, then they go back out, so they understand business very well, and they can support it, and they don't get too involved. Other places, you have people who are lifetime government people trying to understand truly trying to understand entrepreneurs, and they have no chance to understand entrepreneurs. They would have as much chance as you and I of understanding what's good for pandas in China, never having been to China, even with their good intentions. So there's a role, there's a few things that government can do, but a lot of it can be destructive if they're not careful. But government now in New Zealand is coming up with ways to support the culture, to support the networking of entrepreneurs, to support the education of entrepreneurs. And those things are all good. Running companies is not their strength, so they shouldn't be doing that. So I think they can, and I think that's where REAP really helps. They are one of 5 partners at the table. And actually, often they're the ones that provide it because entrepreneurs don't have the money. and risk capital have them doing it. But the government people support REAP. They make it public policy where we work with a number of regions. Scotland's doing a terrific job of this as well. So if there are more questions about government, please send them in, and I'll expound on that more. I think entrepreneurship in the developing world is a very critical thing. It empowers people, and I'll just give you an example here. We put them through the same, we don't believe, it's our belief that every entrepreneur is a social entrepreneur. That means they're social in a kind of a fun sense, but it also means that they have some social conscience. And we don't give them a break at all on how if they're social or not social. They have to have the same discipline as everybody else. What's your cost of customer acquisition? What's your lifetime value of the customer? And that's helped us produce companies like S-Mart that is in Africa right now, and in India, and just won the Dell Social Challenge. But that's a sustainable business that isn't dependent on people giving them handouts. They're creating great value in India, and they're finding ways to monetize that and to create a growing, thriving business. Now, they're not out to make tons of money. They're out to have social impact. Another one is Sasa Africa, which is empowering women in Africa right now. And again, using the same 24-step process where women in Africa today, they're artisans, they're making jewelry, but they didn't have a way to get that jewelry and sell it except walking to the market. But they all had mobile phones. And so what's happened in the entrepreneurial environment is some of our students with Africans, and some of them are African, are actually working with the women to use their cell phones and give them software that they can sell their jewelry worldwide, and they can get the money right away. And this is a great business for the person in the United States who wants to buy original jewelry and support women in Africa to be more empowered. And the women in Africa are now producing better and better jewelry, and they're taking control of their lives. It's a great business, too. I mean, it doesn't require any government handouts. It doesn't require any source of charity. It's just great products produced by people who are working hard. That's the kind of thing that we'd love to see.
Great. Thank you, Bill. And if people would like to learn more about what's happening in the Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, we'll push out the website for that. It's reap.mit.edu. Turning to another sort of theme that's been coming through in these questions, it's not surprising. A lot of people have been asking about finance from different perspectives.
Yeah.
Some of it certainly connects to what you were just talking about, which is, how do people finance enterprises if they're in parts of the world where there isn't access to the kind of finance that perhaps we're fortunate to have available to us here at MIT in Kendall Square. And I think that also speaks to the question of what are the range of different approaches to thinking about how people should finance an enterprise. Is it the classic model of they should take out a second mortgage on their house? And of course, in many parts of the world, as we're getting questions about this, that's not really quite the same thing as it would be here in the U.S. So maybe we'll blend in a little international perspective.
Yeah. So I also travel around. As I mentioned, I'm going to be in Romania in a few weeks. I'll be in Scotland. I was in London. I try to get out and see people with different types of, not just stay here at MIT. And I hear at high levels of people who have a hard time getting money, and then I really get down there, and the real scrappy entrepreneurs find a way to get it done. And there's a great way of financing that's often overlooked by people. It's a group that's willing to finance great new ideas in an amazing way that they won't take any equity. Repeat the names of companies, India and Africa. Okay. I'm sorry, I just got to put in front of me. The name of the company for India and Africa are S-Smart and SASA Africa, S-A-S-A Africa, and S-Smart is E-S-S-M-A-R-T. S-Smart won the Dell Social Challenge in South Africa. And the other thing, by the way, just to note here was that REAP has been a very good program, and Alison Munichiello runs that, and she's here, and she's going to be answering questions on Facebook. And the applications for the next cohort are coming up, and we're looking for a diversified group of people across the United States. The first group included Turkey, Scotland, New Zealand, Finland, China, parts of China, and Veracruz, Mexico. So, in Andalusia, Spain. So we're looking for very diverse groups at different levels.
Sorry, Bill, we interrupted you there. I think you were about to tell us the secret sauce of finding your finance.
So, yeah, the secret sauce of finance, there's a great group that's willing to finance innovative new companies that provide high value-add products to customers, and they don't require any equity, and they will actually pay you cash up front. This group is often overlooked. It's called customers. Customers will pay for this. And often people go and they try to justify their business to venture capitalists before they go to customers. And if you go to customers and show them a great product, time and time again, we have seen with our companies that the customer will actually pay you. And then nothing makes it easier to go raise money if you need to go raise money from venture capital or angels or banks or whatever than purchase orders from real customers. And that's what we really emphasize in financing. We list all the different sources. And a lot of times you have to, you shouldn't take out a second mortgage on your house. But it's going to hurt. You have to find some ways to scrap some money together. But the best sourcing of financing, unquestionably, that we talk about is customers. If they believe in your product, get them to prepay. You can give them a discount. It's the best type of financing you can find.
Great, thank you for that. So keep the questions coming. These are all very interesting questions. I'll do my best to keep transferring them.
This is so hard, Peter, because I can't even see them here. Usually I feed off your energy.
Yes, there are so many questions coming in that we're having a struggle to keep up with it, but that's a great problem to have. So maybe shifting gear a little bit, Bill. We've had some, although most people at the beginning said they were interested in innovation and entrepreneurship, we do have a number of people who are particularly interested in intrapreneurship as well,
yes,
and the role of established and larger companies. And maybe we should put two questions together that are in the two themes. One is around, is there some optimum mix in your mind of incremental or sustaining innovation versus disruptive innovation that an established business should be aiming for? And the second part of that question is, how do established organizations and businesses, whether they're businesses or even regions or universities, how do they establish or create a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship?
Okay, great. So first of all, let me just say, as I tell the students in the classroom who are on this call, the first role of an entrepreneur is, whenever you're asked a question, it's the first thing, is that a valid question? Is that the right question? And the question we ask you up front, are you interested in innovation, entrepreneurship, or intrapreneurship? All those are so interrelated, and understanding one so helps you with the other. And it's understanding the totality of them that I think is really extremely important. And that's why we do all three. So they're all linked. The optimum mix. So let's take a big company. I mean, it depends on the industry you're in. But let's say you're in the oil industry, okay? If you're in the oil industry, you have an enormous part of your business, your core business, which is you should not be disrupting. You're producing oil that needs to be highly reliable, highly safe, supply. That should be only incremental innovation there. Safe stuff. Now, you have to set up a separate structure, organizational structure, be it corporate venture capital, be it a Game Changers if you're at Shell, be it a Sandbox if you're at some other places, where people can experiment without exposing the core business to potential failure or measures of unreliability. So the optimum mix, it depends on what area. So if I have an experimentation area, I want to be trying lots of crazy stuff, then I'm looking at disruptive. If I'm in the core business, I'm looking at almost exclusively incremental. I believe that companies should step back, and not just the CEO, but at the board level, that companies should have not just an audit committee, but they should have an innovation committee. And they should look to see, does our company have a good balance of incremental, of which should probably be the most? Are we looking at disruptive? Are we looking at technology? Are we looking at process? Are we looking at business model? Are we looking at strategy and positioning, market positioning? And having a balance of all those is what they should be looking at. But if you're a big business, let's say you're a billion-dollar-plus business, the biggest one by far is going to be incremental. And and by the way, just a reference here is, there's a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which if you haven't read, is a great book to read for entrepreneurs, which talks about the difference between a red ocean strategy and a blue ocean strategy. And this is one of the books we talk about in our class, is entrepreneurs look for blue ocean, but when you're in a big company, you do blue ocean and red ocean, and you do predominantly red ocean. But when you get a good blue ocean is where there's no blood in the water and no one's gone before. Red ocean is where there's a lot of competition, but you already have a product. So there's a mix between them. So how do you establish culture? It's a great question. It starts at the top. A culture that is run by people who don't put up with failure, and this is the story of IBM. When it started out, Thomas Watson Jr. was very comfortable in his skin, and he welcomed having a small number of wild ducks around. However, as the CEOs became less and less comfortable in their position, down to the last one, is they got rid of all the wild ducks, because wild ducks are expensive, they're annoying, but that's where the disruptive ideas come from. So you really have to set up a culture that can accept wild ducks and have a design where those wild ducks can work in an experimentation area.
Great, thank you, Bill. As we're running into the last couple of minutes of this segment of the webinar, perhaps one last question to sort of sum up the meta question, which I think is on everybody's mind here. It is, given all the kinds of great ideas and information that you've been giving us, we're all entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs as well, so we're action-oriented. Hopefully everyone can stick around for the Facebook chat following this. But what's the thing which people listening to this presentation right now can do when they get off this call, or maybe the latest tomorrow morning, in your opinion, to be successful as entrepreneurs, as innovation-based entrepreneurs? Well, let me just say the first thing is, it's almost kind of a setup here, and this isn't meant to be a commercial, but we educate our students here. We make that education available through MIT Executive Education, and the slide that's up here now goes through those courses. If you're in the energy field, there's energy innovation. If you're in a government or large corporation, you want to help create the ecosystem. That's what you're interested in. If you're an entrepreneur, it's really the EDP program. And then if you're in management and other companies, you can look at some of these other ones. Those, I think, are good. You can't do that tomorrow. Maybe you can sign up and do that. I think you go out and you get books. You start talking to entrepreneurial friends. You get out of your comfort zone and start being comfortable being uncomfortable. Try new things. Go on and if you haven't read Crossing the Chasm or Inside the Tornado, get it. If you haven't read Inbound Marketing, get it and read it. If you haven't got a Blue Ocean Strategy, get it and read it. So I could go on, but I think just being exposed to entrepreneurship and trying to hang out with entrepreneurial friends, you'll get the virus and you'll learn from the community.
So the communities are everywhere now. Go to a hackathon, even if you don't have an idea, and just experience the whole thing. You'll get better at it. It's not hard.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Bill. We really appreciate your time for this past hour during the webinar. And as we mentioned at the top, and I see we have we've got a copy on the question and answers now. Thank you very much. This is Bill's contact information. And as you see, Bill is very socially connected. He has a Twitter feed. He blogs regularly. If you follow Bill on Twitter, be prepared for your Twitter inbox to be very full. He's prolific. And he's going to stick around with us for the next hour to carry on with a Facebook chat. And as Bill mentioned, we also have Alison Yellow with us, who works on the Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, who will join in that chat as well.
So Peter, can I just give my thanks? Thank you to everyone out there from around the world. We're here to help you. The world has lots of problems, and it's not going to be solved by governments. It's going to be solved by thousands of entrepreneurs trying thousands of different things in thousands of different garages around the world. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for having me, Peter.
Thank you very much, and we hope we'll see many of you on the next installation of Innovation at Work. So we'll see you shortly on Facebook.
Thank you again for joining us today. This concludes today's webinar. You may now disconnect.